I was always very interested in the mental training part of the job, and the physical therapy, recovery and regeneration.
And in terms of that mental training, tell us more about that.
Well, one of the bigger challenges that an athlete, an individual faces is to perform under pressure. However you want to define a performance, and however you want to define pressure. So how can we prepare individuals or a team for that situation? So that's one part of it. Another part of it is I get a lot of questions from clubs, federations on athlete development. What are key ingredients? How do we detect and select talent for our academies? And then of course the stress situations that we must address. I'm talking about abuse, substance abuse, composure, etc.
I mean, I suppose it is quite interesting because developing kids and youth players. I mean, the focus is on sort of the technical side of the game and the physical side of the game, and tactically as they get older. Psychologically, that's a big part. I suppose a part that's always quite missing. So is that the area you would sort of specialize in?
Yeah. People call it reading the game. Yeah. And I define it as a good player can create organization in his team and chaos in the opponent's team. Yeah. And then of course, how do we develop that? Yeah. And then we go to functions as pattern recognition, mental representation, composure, and that's what I focus on. Yeah, developing performance construction functions, I call them.
And there's been many clubs that you've worked in Belgium.
In Belgium, but I'm not limited to Belgium. I've traveled around, and I must say, one of my bigger challenges was Aspire, the academy in Qatar, and because there we really started from the grassroots, from nothing, a white piece of paper, and we had to develop everything from scratch. Yeah. And if I compare that to other clubs I've worked in, most of the clubs have a long-standing tradition, and it's more fine-tuning.
Yeah. So maybe give us an example then. Give us an example of going into one of the clubs that were established. What sort of areas did you look to go and work with the players and with the coaches, and then likewise compare that to the project in Aspire in Qatar?
I'll give you the biggest difference is that when an established academy, you start more from a quality management point of view. What are we doing? How can we make this better? What is lacking, and what are we working towards to? Yeah. Whereas when you start from scratch, you literally have to develop everything yourself, and you start more from a starting situation which is a blank, actually. It was very confronting, I can tell you that. You arrive in the desert and there's nothing. How do you start? Yeah. There is also no tradition.
Yeah. And so were you given that blank canvas then to go and create something along with the coaches that you work with, or was there any directive at all that was given?
No. There were, of course, objectives. You have a dream, yeah, but the dream was very open. Yeah. Whereas if you talk to many club directors or sports directors, they immediately come up with like, oh, we want a certain percentage of our players coming from our academies in our first team. Yeah, which is something very different as a goal.
Yeah. And what sort of work then did you do with the young people within the clubs then, in terms of your training?
Well, I start with a pencil and paper approach. This may sound very confronting, or yeah, but we start with first developing very basic functions and also naming them. Yeah, and then we bring them to the training field. Yeah, and then of course we see if we can transfer them to the game.
Yeah.
And now you're going to ask me, give me an example.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I'll give you a very easy example. And for kids, it's fantastic. Is like comparative behavior. Yeah, kids will never understand. Like, coach, what do you mean comparative behavior? Yeah, and I can easily with a pencil and paper test, like I draw two circles, which is the bigger one.
Okay.
Yeah, then they immediately will understand. Oh yes, this is comparing. Yeah. How do I transfer this now to a training situation? I make them sprint, for instance. Who is fastest? Oh yeah, that's comparative behavior. Yeah. If I have to match with somebody in a game, yeah, who do I cover? Why do I cover? How far away? How close can I go? Yeah. Speed becomes very present. And then, of course, in a game situation, how do you line up at a corner kick?
Yeah.
Who do I pick? Why do I pick that person? Yeah. And that's how we kind of come up with. I've created a set of around 40 functions, yeah, performance construction functions that we work around. And you can start very, very young with that.
And what age would you start from with them?
Oh, as early as 4 or 5 years old.
Oh wow.
Yeah, very young. It's like, and everything is game-like.
Yeah.
Because fun is essential.
Yeah. And I think, listen to this, it's a topic I'm quite interested in and would like to understand more, and I'm sure our listeners are the same. Maybe, do you want to give us another example of something that you would work with somebody as young as 4 or 5, using this style?
Yeah, pattern recognition is extremely important. It's like how quickly can you recognize a certain pattern in a team, in a game, and you can again start with a drawing. Yeah, can you recognize a certain pattern in a certain drawing? Yeah, and can you reconstruct that drawing? Yeah. So again, you start with a pencil and paper thing, test, game, and you make sure that your little kid understands, oh, this is a pattern. Yeah. Then you come with or you transfer this to a training session where you only work on patterns. I'll give you an easy example. With little kids, you ask them, can you stand in a circle? Do they understand the pattern circle? Can you then run and stay in that circle?
Okay.
Yeah. Can you do the same with a square, with a name any pattern? Yeah. And after that, of course, you will transfer that to, okay, if we play a game, I want to see you play in a triangle, the point forward or the point back, or name it.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So sort of helping them teach with basic shape and patterns then.
Yeah. And then, of course, you start working on observations as well. Can you observe what's happening with your opponent? What pattern do they use?
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. It's a very, very, very interesting subject, you know, and how do you find the kids respond to it? You know, does it take them a while to get used to this type of training?
Well, the good thing is that there is always the fun element in the approach,
Mm-hmm.
meaning it's games. Yeah, it's testing and training, but it's in a game-like approach. And I try always to start from something that looks very similar to the football game,
mm-hmm.
something that they can immediately relate.
Yeah.
And then when at first they kind of children are always very honest.
Mm-hmm.
So that the first thing they'll ask is like, why, how, what, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you can make that connection, and they all can make that connection, then they will absorb it like a sponge.
Yeah, yeah.
And they will come, yeah, they will come back to you and say like, oh, can we do that again?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And how often would you take this approach, you know, with each group? Would you be working daily, weekly?
No, you know, one of the big challenges is, of course, that a field coach has to give up some time, and then we come to a crucial point: time. Yeah, and some want to give up a lot of time, and some coaches are like, no, 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 no. I need every minute of my practice time.
Yeah.
So then you start a kind of a cost and benefit approach. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there are moments where I get, at the start of every session, I get 10 minutes. And there are other coaches that say like, no, 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 no. You know, you get your assigned block every week.
And give us a few more of those examples, because I know you'd said that you'd created about 40 functions in terms of the performance constructions. You know, is there maybe another example or two you can give to the listeners?
Yeah. Let's say verbalization skills.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is a typical one. The tone of the message is often more important than the message itself.
Okay. Yeah.
Playing in a team, you have to get along with the 11 players on the pitch. Then you have your subs, you have the whole staff, etc. And now, even for little kids, and little kids are extremely honest, it's important that they become aware of, it's not only what I say, it's also how I say it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then we go to terminology as non-judgmental communication.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And again, there you can come up with a very paper and pencil approach. Describe what you see here. Yeah. And describe it again, but make it non-judgmental.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you bring it to the field. Yeah. Very simple. If you see a teammate, what do you see?
Yeah.
Describe your teammate. What are the strong points? What are the weak points? How
Mm-hmm.
would you present this information to your teammate? How can you help your teammate to get better? Yeah. And then again, transfer that to a game situation.
I like that. I mean, going back years ago with one of my age groups, we used that approach in terms of picking sort of 3 qualities of your teammate out, which we thought was quite a good approach after maybe like a disappointing result when, you know, the kids lose a game, the sort of their confidence is down a wee bit, and we asked the kids to write down 3 things that you see as 3 qualities as your teammate and bring them to training the next night. And we found that was very, very positive. It gave everybody a real boost, you know, especially receiving that information from a teammate.
Yeah, great idea. Great approach. Yeah. I'll give you another one, initiative.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what of course it's cultural. Yeah, but what you see a lot is all the initiative in club teams is with the coach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the kids come to the pitch and everything is organized for them. They literally don't have to take any initiative. Yeah. Then we go about like, what is initiative? What do we want to get out of it? Yeah. And it ends up with really, really early age running the whole practice from warming up to the cool down, from creating their own games to fantasy games to real soccer or football simulation games.
Yeah.
And I get a lot of questions when I evaluate academies on lack of creativity. Yeah, we need somebody that can literally add that creative touch to our game, and it's so difficult to develop that. But how can you imagine to develop creative players if you never ever give them initiative?
That's true. That's a huge point there, because everything's taken away from them. I suppose it's a bit like society nowadays. We try to take away the risk of kids growing up. I think I talked about it in another podcast previous, about kids maybe struggling to cross a road because parents are trying to protect them too much and stop them from going out and being adventurous. Like, I mean, when we grew up as children, sometimes you're out, you're playing, you're climbing trees, you're experiencing things, but all of a sudden now, whatever way it is it's perceived to be, whether it's media driven or what, or there being more cars on the road, that parents seem to stress about their kids playing outside of their homes.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, we are overprotective. And in the same kind of area, you have that fear of making mistakes. Yeah, and it's so important that we are allowed to make mistakes, that we are in a safe environment to make mistakes, that we can laugh afterwards with the mistakes that we made, that everybody can make a mistake, and that we just move on.
Anybody that's listening to this podcast that maybe is like a basic grassroots club that maybe only have limited access with their players maybe once, twice a week, you know, how best can they sort of fit this kind of training into their current setup?
Well, what I would suggest in that script is that you take a 10-minute time slot at the start of every practice, and you work around one of those performance construction functions. Yeah. And I'm saying now 10 minutes, maybe 5 is enough. Yeah. Maybe you have to take it a little bit longer for another function, but you kind of ingrain this into your normal practices. Yeah. And as a coach, you can easily kind of keep track of what you've worked on, and you can evaluate like, okay, this was working, this was not working, this we have to repeat more often, this we can skip, this is ingrained in our team. Yeah. And time is not going to be the decisive factor.